The sound of laughter echoed through the room as the guests mingled, glasses clinking and conversations flowing easily. It was my sister's wedding, a day she had spent years planning, a day that was supposed to be perfect. But for me, it wasn't. I stood off to the side, watching the celebration unfold around me, my heart heavy with a sense of exclusion that I couldn't shake. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I had always been there for her, the sister who was supposed to stand by her side, who was supposed to be included in all of it. Yet I felt like a stranger at my own sister's wedding. As I walked up to the dining table, hoping to find my place, I was met with a look from Ashley that I couldn't quite decipher at first. Her eyes scanned me quickly, then flickered back to the guest list. She smiled, but there was something cold about it. "This table is for family," she said, her voice dripping with a mock sweetness. "Go out and find a seat." The words cut through me like a sharp blade. Family? I was family. But apparently I wasn't part of the family she had in mind. I stood there for a moment, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. I had spent my whole life supporting her, being her shoulder to cry on, helping her through the tough times, and this was how she repaid me? The laughter of the other guests continued to wash over me as I slowly turned and walked away, the weight of the rejection settling heavily on my chest. My mind was spinning. How could she do this to me? She was my sister, my flesh and blood. What had I done wrong? As I walked further away, I could feel my face flush with embarrassment. She had just humiliated me in front of everyone, and it wasn't just about the seating, it wasn't about the table at all. It was the fact that, for some reason, she felt the need to exclude me in front of everyone to make it clear that I didn't belong. I walked into the bathroom to collect myself, the sting of her words still fresh. I wasn't the kind of person to cry over something like this. I had always been the strong one, the one who took the hits and kept going. But something about this, something about her, had broken me. The mirror in front of me reflected a woman who was torn between anger and hurt. I had always been there for her, but now I wasn't even worth a seat at her wedding. I took a deep breath, wiped away a stray tear, and decided it was time to stop feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't going to let her rejection define me. I didn't need her approval to validate my worth. But I also wasn't going to let her get away with treating me like this. As I walked out of the bathroom, I knew I had to make a choice. I could let this slide, I could keep my mouth shut, and go on pretending like everything was okay, or I could stand up for myself and show her that this wasn't how I was going to let her treat me anymore. I walked back into the ballroom, my mind made up. I wasn't going to let this slide. The humiliation, the disregard, the cutting words. None of it was acceptable. I loved my sister, but this was the moment where I needed to stop being the passive one in our relationship. I wasn't going to play the role of the underappreciated sister anymore. I deserved more. As I made my way through the crowd, I could see Ashley surrounded by her friends and extended family, laughing and basking in the glow of her special day. She looked happy, of course, but I couldn't ignore the slight unease in her eyes whenever she glanced my way. She knew what she had done. I stood for a moment, watching her, trying to decide how best to handle this. Should I confront her now in front of everyone? Should I quietly leave, saving myself from further embarrassment? But then I remembered something important. This wasn't just about my sister's wedding. This was about how I had allowed myself to be treated for far too long. I had spent my life playing second fiddle, always bending over backward for her, always putting her needs above my own. But not today. Today, I was going to stand up for myself. I approached the group, my heart pounding in my chest. As soon as Ashley saw me, her smile faltered. She knew what was coming. I could see her tense up, but there was no way she could avoid this anymore. I wasn't going to let her think that she could just exclude me without facing the consequences. "Ashley," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "we need to talk." The room seemed to quiet down slightly, as if people could sense the tension between us. I wasn't sure if it was the fear of confrontation or just the weight of the situation, but suddenly it felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see how this would play out. Ashley, trying to play it off as casual, smiled and said, What's the matter? Come on, let's not make a scene. But I could see the flicker of discomfort in her eyes. I don't want to make a scene, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just want to know why you think it's okay to treat me like I don't matter, why you think it's okay to cut me out of your life like I'm some stranger. Her expression shifted, and I could tell she wasn't expecting me to call her out like this. The confident bride was starting to crack under the pressure. I didn't mean it like that, she said, but there was a nervousness in her tone now. I just thought, well, you're not exactly like the others. You're too country for this wedding. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Too country. Was that all it took? A label? A simple judgment to decide that I didn't belong? I took a deep breath, trying to keep the rising tide of emotion in check. This wasn't about me being too country. This was about her not accepting me for who I was. I don't care about being too country, I said, my voice rising a little. I care about being your sister, and for you to tell me that I don't belong at your wedding of all things that hurts. You didn't just exclude me from a table, Ashley. You excluded me from your life. The room was quiet now. People were watching, and I could feel their eyes on me, but it didn't matter. This wasn't for them. This was for me. Ashley opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. She looked around, almost as if searching for a way out, but there was none. She had done this, and she needed to own it. I think you need to think about this wedding and your relationships, I continued, my voice calmer now, because you're not just marrying someone today, you're also making choices about who you want in your life, and if this is how you treat family, then maybe it's time to rethink what kind of family you want to have. Ashley's face flushed, and for the first time, I saw something close to guilt in her eyes. It wasn't the perfect, curated image she had created for herself. It was raw, and it was real. She wasn't the perfect bride anymore. She was just a woman who had made a mistake and was too proud to admit it. I never wanted to hurt you, she finally said, her voice shaking. I've just been so caught up in this day, in everything being perfect. I don't know why I said those things. I took a step forward, my voice softening. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but that doesn't change the fact that you did. I'm not here to tear you down, Ashley. I'm just here to say that you don't get to treat me this way anymore. I'm not your doormat. I'm not just someone you can push aside when it's convenient. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I raised a hand to stop her. I'm done, Ashley. I'm done being treated like I don't matter. Maybe one day we can fix this, but I need you to understand that this was my breaking point. The silence in the room stretched on, thick and heavy. People were still watching, but for the first time I didn't care. I had said what needed to be said. The anger I had been holding inside for so long was finally out, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But the aftermath felt like a void. Ashley stood frozen in place, her expression one of shock, as if she couldn't believe I'd stood up to her in front of everyone. I'd always been the quiet one, the one who let things slide, always eager to please, always doing the right thing to keep the peace. But this time was different. For the first time, I wasn't playing the role of the dutiful, overlooked sister. I wasn't going to be the one who always gave and gave without ever getting anything in return. I was done hiding myself, pretending to be something I wasn't, just to make someone else feel comfortable. I could see the gears turning in Ashley's head. She was probably trying to come up with an excuse, a way to minimize what she'd done. But I wasn't giving her that option anymore. Ashley, I said, my voice softer now, yet still firm. You've made your choices. You've made me feel small, invisible, like I don't matter. You can keep pretending this is about a wedding, but it's not. It's about respect. And you didn't respect me. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she finally took a step toward me. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I got caught up in the perfect wedding I wanted, and I forgot about everything else. About you. For a moment, I wanted to feel sorry for her. I wanted to believe that she truly understood the pain she'd caused. But then I remembered everything that had led up to this, the years of silence, the subtle digs, the little ways she had made me feel inferior. This wasn't just a one-time mistake, it was a pattern. She had made me feel like I didn't belong in her life for years, and I had let it slide. I wasn't going to do that anymore. "I get that you wanted your day to be perfect," I said, my voice steady. "But that doesn't give you the right to treat me like I'm not a part of your life, Ashley. You've made me feel like I don't fit into your picture, and I'm done letting you decide where I belong." She wiped her eyes and nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I just wanted everything to go well." I shook my head. "You can't expect everything to be perfect, Ashley. Perfection doesn't exist. And in trying to make everything perfect, you've hurt the people who matter the most." For the first time, I saw her look at me with a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Maybe it was the weight of the moment, or maybe it was just that for once I wasn't backing down, but there was something in her eyes that told me she was beginning to understand. "I don't want to lose you, Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're my sister, and I don't want to push you away." I stood there, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't that simple. Words alone couldn't fix what had been broken. I wasn't going to forgive her just because she was sorry, but I also realized that I wasn't going to let this destroy me either. I wasn't going to hold on to the anger forever. "I'm not going to pretend like this didn't hurt," I said, "but I'm willing to try again, if you really mean it. If you're truly sorry for what you've done, then we can try to rebuild this. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take effort. I'm not just going to let you sweep it under the rug and pretend like everything is okay." Ashley nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes, Sarah. I'll prove to you that I'm sorry. I don't want to lose my sister." I looked at her for a long moment, then took a deep breath. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other despite everything. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the person who would let someone walk all over me. I had stood up for myself, and that made all the difference. "I'm not going to give you a free pass, Ashley," I said, my voice firm, "but I'll try. For us." The days after our confrontation were strange, like I was living in a limbo between what had happened and what could be. Ashley and I both knew that things couldn't go back to how they were before. The past couldn't be erased, and the hurt didn't just disappear with a few words. But as the wedding went on, I found that maybe the most important thing wasn't whether or not I stayed at the table, it was about what came next. Ashley didn't avoid me anymore. Instead, she came to me, asking how I was feeling, how I could be a part of the day without feeling like I didn't belong. She was trying, and for the first time, I could see the sincerity in her eyes. She was acknowledging the hurt, not just brushing it off, and I knew she was doing her best to make things right. The wedding went on, and although it wasn't perfect, it was beautiful in its own way. But for me, the real beauty came in the quiet moments between Ashley and me. After everything we'd been through, I realized that it wasn't the wedding that mattered most. It was the effort to repair what had been broken. We shared moments in between the chaos of the ceremony and reception. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was real. Ashley took the time to sit down with me, to listen, and I did the same for her. For the first time in years, we weren't sisters in competition. We were sisters, real, imperfect, raw, and willing to rebuild. "Do you want to dance?" Ashley asked me at one point as the music played softly in the background. I smiled, nodding, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for that yet. "I don't know if I can do the whole perfect dance thing," I replied, a soft chuckle escaping my lips. She laughed, then gently took my hand, leading me to the floor. "Then just dance with me, however you want. We don't need to be perfect. We just need to be us." As we swayed together, just the two of us, I realized something. The pain I'd carried was still there, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been. It was like a weight had been lifted from my heart, even though it wasn't completely gone. It would take time for everything to heal, but in that moment, I could see the possibility of forgiveness, of understanding, and even of growth. The wedding ended, and as we said our goodbyes, I knew things weren't perfect between Ashley and me. We still had work to do, but I was no longer that person who would quietly take the back seat. I had found my voice, and that made all the difference. Ashley came up to me one last time before I left, her eyes sincere. "I know I hurt you, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. I love you, and I hope one day we can really heal." I smiled at her, a smile that wasn't forced but genuine. "We will, Ashley, one day at a time." As I drove home that night, I reflected on everything that had happened: the wedding, the confrontation, the painful words, and the healing that was still to come. But most of all, I reflected on how far I'd come. I had been rejected, excluded, and humiliated, but I had stood up for myself, and no matter what happened next, I knew I had done the right thing. I wasn't just a sister. I wasn't just someone who fit into someone else's mold. I was me, and for the first time in a long time, I was proud of that.